What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? It's a classic question. But in 53 BC, on a scorching, dusty plain near the town of Carrhae, the world witnessed a different phenomenon. What happens when a mighty, arrogant force meets a brilliant, adaptable one? This is the story of the Battle of Carrhae. A battle that wasn't just a military defeat for Rome, but a catastrophic shock to its very soul. It was a day that saw the death of a general, the annihilation of his army, and the loss of something sacred to Rome, its Legionary Eagles. Welcome to the story of one of the most devastating and tactically masterful battles in ancient history. To understand Carrhae, we need to meet the key players. On one side, the Roman Republic. Not the empire of the Caesars yet, but a powerful, expansionist state, fresh from crushing Spartacus's slave rebellion. The man leading the Romans was Marcus Licinius Crassus. Imagine the richest man in the world, perhaps of all history relative to his time. He was a member of the First Triumvirate, alongside Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar. But Crassus had a problem. He had immense wealth, but he lacked military glory. His partners had it in spades. He was desperate for a conquest to match his fortune. So, at the age of 62, he secured the governorship of Syria, eyeing the only prize big enough: the wealthy Parthian Empire to the east. Now, let's look at Parthia. This wasn't a disorganized barbarian horde. It was a sophisticated, powerful empire that controlled the Silk Road. Their military was completely different from Rome's. While Rome relied on the disciplined heavy infantry of the legions, Parthia's strength was its cavalry. And their commander was a man named Surena. Don't let his title, Spabard, or general fool you. He was a military genius, young, charismatic, and fiercely loyal. He was also the commander of the Parthian elite, the cataphracts and horse archers. Crassus saw a land ripe for plunder. The Parthian king, Orodes II, saw an invasion. And Surena? He saw an opportunity. In the spring of 53 BC, Crassus crossed the Euphrates River with a massive force. Ancient sources say 7 legions. That's about 35,000 heavy infantry, plus another 4,000 light infantry and 4,000 cavalry. A grand army of over 40,000 men. Almost immediately, things went wrong. He was advised by his Armenian allies to take a northern route through the mountains, where the terrain would protect his flanks and there was plenty of water. But Crassus, impatient for glory, was lured by what seemed like an easier path straight across the flat, open plains of Mesopotamia. This was a fatal mistake. He was leading his army, a force built for close-quarters combat, into a wide-open desert, the perfect battlefield for Parthia's mobile cavalry. His scouts reported signs of the Parthian army, but they were vague. Small bands of horsemen were spotted, then would vanish into the heat haze. The Romans grew anxious, parched by the relentless sun. The mood was tense. Then, on June 9th, near the town of Carrhae, his advanced scouts rode back in a panic. They had made contact. The main Parthian force was ahead, and it was coming right for them. Crassus, surprised, quickly arranged his men into a large hollow square, a classic defensive formation, with each legionary's shield overlapping his neighbor's. He thought he was ready. Then, the Parthians appeared, and it was nothing like the Romans had ever seen. First, to demoralize them, the Parthians beat great war drums that made a deep, horrifying rumble, a sound that shook the Romans to their core. Then came Surena's masterstroke. He hid the bulk of his heavy cataphracts, men and horses covered head to toe in scale armor, behind his lines. What the Romans saw first was his cloud of horse archers. These archers surrounded the Roman square and began to unleash a hail of arrows. These weren't ordinary arrows. They were the famous Parthian shot, fired with incredible accuracy and power from composite bows, even while riding away. The Romans were trapped. They couldn't charge. The horse archers were too fast. They could only stand there, their shields becoming pincushions. The desert sun baked them in their armor. Men began to fall, not just from arrows, but from heat stroke and exhaustion. Every so often, Crassus would send out his light infantry or cavalry to try and drive the archers off. This was exactly what Surena wanted. As soon as the Romans broke formation, the hidden cataphracts would thunder out, a wall of steel and lance, and annihilate the isolated Romans before retreating again. It was a brutal, systematic slaughter. The Roman testudo was strong, but it was static. They were being bled dry, arrow by arrow. The ground was littered with wounded and dead. The cries of men and the unending drone of the war drums filled the air. As night fell, the arrows finally stopped. The Parthians pulled back to camp, knowing the Romans were broken. Crassus, utterly defeated, collapsed in despair. The Romans knew they had to retreat. Under cover of darkness, they left behind thousands of their wounded, a haunting sound that would torment the survivors. They tried to flee to the safety of Carrhae, but it was a nightmare. Surena wasn't finished. He hunted them down. Crassus's son, Publius, had led a brave but doomed cavalry charge earlier and had taken his own life to avoid capture. Now, it was the father's turn. Surena offered to negotiate a truce. A broken Crassus, seeing a chance to save what was left of his army, agreed to meet. But it was a trap. During the meeting, a scuffle broke out. Who started it is lost to history, and Crassus was killed. The story goes that the Parthians, knowing his famous greed, poured molten gold down his throat as a symbol of his insatiable thirst for wealth. A grisly end for the richest man in Rome. Of the 40,000 men who marched into that desert, only about 10,000 ever made it back to Roman territory. Another 10,000 were captured and sent to miserable fates as prisoners in the east. The rest, nearly 20,000 legionaries, lay dead on the sand. And most horrifying of all for Rome, the Parthians had captured several of their sacred Legionary Eagles. This was the ultimate symbol of shame. The immediate aftermath was a power shift. The Parthian Empire had secured its borders and proved it was a superpower equal to Rome. For the Romans, it was a national trauma. It ended the First Triumvirate, destabilizing the Republic and helping pave the way for the civil wars that would eventually create the empire under Augustus. The defeat at Carrhae created a lasting obsession in Rome. It established the Euphrates River as a permanent, contentious border between two worlds, Rome and Parthia, and later Sassanid Persia, for centuries to come. It would be decades before Augustus could negotiate the return of the lost eagles, finally avenging the shame. The Battle of Carrhae teaches us that no matter how powerful you are, arrogance and a failure to understand your enemy can lead to utter ruin. It wasn't just a battle lost with swords and shields, but one lost with pride and ignorance. That's the story of the Battle of Carrhae. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, please hit the like button, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories from the past. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below. See you in the next video.